21st Century Dad Foundation, which is also a nonprofit that here at Lucky Kid that we'll be partnering with. He already received countless of awards for everything that he has been doing. He's also a host of a very popular podcast called Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Now, with his podcast, he already have more than 160 episodes, which you can go search for his podcast as well. And he's also an author of multiple books. One of the books that he have written is about a father's journey to break the cycle of father's absence. So it's my honor to introduce David to today's show. Let me put him on. So, hey, David, thank you so much for joining us today. And we are really, really honored to have you.
Jason, great to be with you. I always love your energy.
Thank you. I'm always very hyper, as you can know. I'm all about, because when you, like I shared before, when you're doing something you truly enjoy and truly love, I just couldn't help, but I get just high on waters all the time. So
just you need to like back off on the caffeine a little bit, though.
Yeah, so let's dive into today's interview. First of all, I have a list of questions I will be asking you. The first question is, what inspired you to even create 21st Century Dad Foundation?
Yeah, well, the short story is that I grew up in a father-absent home, and I have a lot of respect for single moms, most of which did not sign up to be single moms and raise their kids on their own. And that was sort of my backstory. And flash forward to when I was 36 years old, my wife and I had just had our fifth child, and I was looking for father resources, and I stumbled across these statistics. There's some 24 million kids growing up in father-absent homes here in America. And when you do the math, it's about 4 out of every 10. And I thought, wow, that's just an overwhelming statistic. Somebody should do something about that. So I helped start something called the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative. That organization still exists today, 25 years later. And it's a partnership with the school systems to get dads actively involved in their children's education. And about 6 years ago, a group of volunteers helped start a second not-for-profit, which is the 21st Century Dads Foundation.
I see. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the community. This is something that is really needed. And I feel like we really need to expand or help you to expand your organization into Asia, because unfortunately, father absences is very, very typical in the Asian household, because the dad is expected to be the breadwinner of the house, so they are never around. They are always working. I remember when I used to work in Japan many years ago. I worked for a giant corporation called Toshiba, and I would leave my house, let's see, 6 a.m. in the morning, take a train to go to the office, and I will work all the way until like 7 or 8 p.m. Then I will need to, it's expected, it's like a social norm that you're supposed to go drink with your supervisor after work. And then I will try to get home. And by the time I get home, sometimes it's like 10 or 11 p.m. And that's the norm. That's the norm in Asia. So when you talk about father absences, is most of the father in Asia, they are all absent because they are never home.
Well, between working and going drinking, when do you have time to go to your Alcoholics Anonymous meetings?
That's a good question. I don't. So, yeah. So that's the situation in Asia, unfortunately. So, and that's very, very common. So the next question I have for you, I know there's various of different programs that 21st Century Dad Foundation offer. Can you elaborate on a few of them?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. So the signature program of the 21st Century Dads Foundation is something called the Special Fathers Network. It's a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. And the idea behind that is to get the more seasoned dads to come alongside the younger dads who are closer to the beginning of their journey, raising a child, or in some cases, children with special needs. And we had the simple notion that we would recruit a bunch of seasoned dads, maybe with 10 or more years of experience raising a child, or in some cases, children with special needs. And then we would try to identify these super young families, call it the early intervention age families with kids 0 to 3, who were at the very beginning of their journey raising a child with a recent diagnosis. And we've done a fabulous job recruiting 500 plus dads, mostly from around the US, but now a little bit beyond, to serve as the mentor fathers. And what's proven to be more difficult or challenging, Jason, is getting in front of those young families. There's just so many things that are going on. Think about when your son was first diagnosed with autism when he was 18 months or 2 years old, right? You're a deer in the headlights, right? You know, and if you can just get through the day, hold your job down, hold your marriage together, your relationship together, and just be present, is a big challenge. So we can really use people's help to get the message out to these young families, because we've got an amazing resource. We've got this extraordinary small army of dads who are ready, willing, and able to volunteer to just be available to answer questions. And let me be crystal clear about what those dads are expected to do. They're not giving legal advice. That's what lawyers do. They're not giving medical advice. That's what doctors do. They're just giving practical advice. What did you do in this situation or that situation? Who do you talk to? Who do you turn to? Because it can be very isolating, if you have a child with a diagnosis.
I will 100% agree to that. And unfortunately, for the dad that's in the early intervention ages, a lot of the dad is still in the phase of denial. They don't even refuse to believe, because that was the mindset I remember I shared with you. And I was in denial for like the first 6 months. It's like, there's no way my son have autism, because no one in my family ever had autism. And I saw autism is like a generic disorder. So since no one in my family ever had it before, it doesn't make sense that my son will ever have it. So I was in that mindset. I was in that loop where my wife is being the wise mom she is. She already know that something very different about our son at a very early age, because she will bring our son to the playground, and my son would just play in the corner by himself for like 1 hour straight without interacting with anyone for the whole time. So that, I mean, I don't see that, because as an Asian dad, I'm not even home. So I never see that. So from my perspective, I just hearing story from my wife about my son and say, maybe you are over exaggerating. Maybe you are just worrying too much. It's a mindset that a lot of the younger dad are sometimes in. Like you mentioned, they are just overwhelmed with work. They are trying to put everything together, pay for the family, and try to figure out the situation. And especially when my son, he's my first kid. I have 3 kids now, so we're getting a lot better on handling this kind of situation. But as your first kid, you just feel overwhelmed. It's like you don't know what to do, you don't know what to expect, you don't even have anyone to talk with. So having organization like yours that can link up that connection between a seasoned father and a new father, I feel like that's incredible. I really wish that I know about your organization back then in Japan, because it was a very, very lonely journey as a dad. I have no one to talk to. It's not like I can talk with my coworker, because most of my coworker don't even have kids when I have my first son, because I got married kind of early, and we have our first son kind of early in my I guess career or in my life. So I would say that's very, very common. So definitely trying to reach. I think we need to reach out to those younger dads through the moms almost, because because the dad is usually not involved in any social media. There's just no way to reach out to the dad. Like all the thing we're doing right now on social media, doing the interview, most of the people that will be watching this will be the moms. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the current situation. So,
Well, you raise a good point, which is denial is one of the stumbling blocks. And, I can remember as a younger dad, maybe I still do this today. I'll say to my wife, let's not pre-worry our worries, right? Let's take a wait and see attitude. And it's not like you're in total denial, but it feels like, you want to be sure before you, engage. And I think that that's okay for a short period of time, like you were saying. It could be days or weeks, but if it goes on for months or years, you have to do a reality check and say, hey, maybe I am avoiding the situation. Maybe we do need to seek resources. And when, you take a step back and you look at the big picture and you understand the world of special needs on a broad basis, it's not just autism. It could include Down syndrome. It could include epilepsy or rare disease. There's so many different things that special needs includes. The earlier you seek resources, the earlier the intervention takes place, the better the outcomes are for the child and for the family. So while there's a reluctance, a natural reluctance on parents' parts, not just dads, but in some cases moms too, I think a strength, it's perceived as a weakness. Oh, we need help. It's a weakness. It's actually a superpower, right? To be able to engage and to get more resources, right? Almost be greedy about getting resources, right? Like, I don't want to do this on my own. I want to err on the side of engaging other people is the advice I would offer.
Yeah, and I just, for the reminder for those of you that's watching us live, please comment below on your experience when you first learn about the diagnosis. It's either could be any kind of special need, like David was talking about. It could be autism, could be a sensory issue, could be Down syndrome. It's very similar journey when you have kids with special needs. The journey is very similar. You always go through, especially for the dads at least, you always go through a phase of denial. Then you finally got diagnosis. Now we go into problem solving modes and see how we can solve this problem as a dad. And that was a mindset I was in initially. It's like, I want to fix my son. How can I fix him so he doesn't have autism anymore? And I will go through a whole bunch of books. I bought a whole set of libraries of books about autism, about different intervention we can be doing, different therapy we can doing, what country we should be going to instead of Japan, because Japan is not a good country to be in when you have kids with special needs. And I shared this openly multiple times on the Lucky Kid live stream and with our email, people that's subscribed to our email newsletter. When I first got the diagnosis with my son, we used to live in Tokyo, one of the largest metropolitan area in the world, with population of 14 million people, but we can only find 2 therapy centers to go to in the entire metropolitan area. That's just insane. It blows your mind when you think about it now. Unfortunately, as of today, 2022, that situation is still not much better. So I'm committed to try to change that in my lifetime. I committed, like I shared with you, my 10-year vision with Lucky Kid is I want to go out and change 1 million life. And that's including the life of family back in Asia. And we are actually actively trying to expand into Asia this year. We are going into Amazon Japan's marketplaces. We're also going into Amazon Singapore this year, try to provide our product and services and different things we're doing in Asia, because that's where the help is just not there. It's almost close to zero existent on any of the, nonprofit like yours doesn't exist in Asia. That doesn't exist simply because no one talk about it.
Well, it's not just America and it's not just in Japan. It's all around the world. And, there are some cultural differences. Let's acknowledge that. But at the very core level, most parents, all they want for their kids is to have them reach their full potential, right? And at some level, you have to embrace your child where they're at and not have them try to meet some false expectations, preconceived notions about what you had anticipated your child would be like or what they would be able to do, and just love them for who they are.
For sure. Yeah, so let me move on to the next question we have. It's going to be a little bit interesting question. So for you, what is the hardest part of being a dad at the same time being an entrepreneur? Because I always think running a nonprofit, just like running a business, is actually even harder because it's harder to raise money as a nonprofit. It's not like you can just go out and sell stuff like a typical business can. Like there's a different way that you can do fundraising. So I think in core, we are both entrepreneur, but just operating under a different vehicle. So the question for you is, how do you juggle being a dad and an entrepreneur at the same time?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And just so your viewing audience knows, my wife and I have been married for almost 39 years. I work full-time as a wealth manager, and I have had the same job for 36 years. It's a full-time job. It's not like just 40 hours a week, 50, 60 plus hours a week, sometimes nights and weekends. And I'm not complaining. I'm not looking for sympathy or pity when I say that, but it's a very full life, having a large family and having a full-time career. So you are accurate in asking, how do you find the time, right, to do something of consequence in the community, not just volunteer a couple hours here, a couple hours there, but I probably put, no exaggeration, 20, 25 hours a week into the not-for-profit work. And there's a lot of give and take, right? The advice I got from a career standpoint years and years ago was that um, family is the most important thing. So always keep your family at the center. The next circle, if you're thinking about concentric circles, is the work that you do that supports your family. And if you have the type of job that allows you to, what I think of as springboard out into the community, right, to address important social issues, whether it's on a small scale or on a large scale, like we're talking about, um, just continue to do more of that. And one of the things that I found is that um, human beings' interests change on average every 7 years or so. Maybe that's where the term 7-year itch comes from. But for some, it's for 3 years. For some, it might be 5 years. But some, it could be longer. So your interests, our interests, will evolve and change. And this interest, this curiosity that I had about addressing the issue of father absence in society, was something that I mentioned started shortly after the birth of our fifth child back in 1996. So that itch still needs to be scratched, at least for me. And, admittedly, it's not always in balance, right? Sometimes the family demands a lot more time, right? You've got a crisis or something going on in your family. Work, could demand a lot of your time. I'm thinking of the 4 bear markets that I've worked through in the last 36 years, where, things are on fire. People are losing lots of money. The markets are going down. There's a lot of uncertainty. And then, there's times when the not-for-profit requires a lot of attention. Maybe volunteers don't follow through, so you've got to pick up the slack, or you're planning a big event and you've got to, garner a lot of resources, leading up to that event. And I know that my life has been out of balance. And one of the ways that my wife has communicated with me, because husband and wives have a good way of communicating, she would say to me in as many words, "Hey, Mr. Fatherhood, why don't you just spend some more time with your own kids as opposed to trying to solve everybody else's problems?" And, at first I pushed back, but, I had to admit that, maybe things were out of balance,
Yeah.
right? And that would,
David, actually, my wife say almost the exact phrase to me 2 years ago. She say the exact same. It's like, why are you going out and save all the other family that have kids with special needs when you're not even home and save our son with special needs? That's what she told me 2 years ago.
that's a good question, though. I mean, you have to be honest with yourself, right? Where do you draw the line? And I don't know that there's a black and white line. And I think that there's a give and take. So you need to be present in your own family, present for your wife, present for your own kids. But if you do feel the gravitational pull to make a difference, right? It's a calling. That's what I think of it as. It's something that, you can't really rationalize or justify because, most of us would be perfectly happy with, I work to support my family and I want to spend as much of my time with my family. But, I think it's healthy to get outside of work, healthy to get outside of the family. Not that you're abandoning them or not fulfilling your responsibilities, but you bring something extra to work. You bring something extra to your family when you're volunteering and you're making a difference in other people's lives. And, when your kids are super young, you do need to spend more time, right? Being involved with their development, their education, and trying to impart, important values and develop certain characteristics. But as your kids get older, they're looking for independence. They don't want to hang with mom and dad, right? They're going to be pushing back. So, how are you going to use that time? And many guys, especially once you've been successful, will spend more time golfing or more time playing tennis or more time, fill in the blank, right? Those are healthy pursuits. Sometimes they, pursue unhealthy pursuits, like drugs and alcohol and, other things that, maybe we don't need to go into. But I think that trying to maintain a balance between work and family is the typical paradigm. But I would challenge, our listeners or our viewers to be thinking, well, what's the third leg to that stool, or what's the fourth leg to that stool? And for me, it's family, it's faith, it's community or volunteering, and it's work. I don't know that they're always in that order, but that's how I think of the priorities. So I think of it as a four-legged stool, and I want to make sure that I'm investing time and energy into each of those areas. And I'm very fortunate to have had a very stable career and be successful from an occupational standpoint. So I don't have to spend the sheer amount of time that I did as a young worker, trying to get established. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. This is also something I struggle a lot for being a dad and an entrepreneur is sometimes it's hard to put that boundary between the two because as an entrepreneur, you are always thinking about new business idea, new project I can be working on, new partnership, new product, new services. That's all I think about all the time. I couldn't turn it off. It's just part of me. That's just the way I operate nowadays. So right now, I'm actually in a co-working space because my wife said you need to get out of the house because I've been working on the home for like the past couple of years, and it's just getting a point that it become a little bit unhealthy that I couldn't really have a very clear, I guess, transition between work and life because it's just get commingled together like into one. Like I will be doing something with my kid and still thinking about the business. It's hard for me to turn it off. So right now, since I have a co-working space now, it's a little bit easier for me to do the transition compared to before, but sometimes I still bring a little bit of work home. So right now, this is something I'm trying to work on. And as you already know, I have a day job for the past 6 years running Lucky Kid. On top of the Lucky Kid, I have 3 kids and a day job. Next Monday is actually my last day of my day job. So I will be officially going full time into the business. So it's a huge transition and a huge leap of faith for me and for my family because I'm the only breadwinner. My wife is not making income, it's just me. So it's also a huge transition on the time management on my end. So I think for those dad that's watching, it's very important for you to figure out the boundary. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or you're working for someone else. Sometimes the work just inevitably is going to spill over to your personal life. So thank you for sharing that very much.
Yeah, I would just say one more thing. I think the idea that came to mind when you said that you're working outside the home in a shared workspace is the importance of compartmentalizing, right?
Yeah.
When I'm doing this, that's what I'm focused on. When I'm doing that, that's what I'm focused on. And if you can, try not to be multitasking, right? Try to be focused and present where you are as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to do multiple things. But again, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, let me move on to the next question. Do you have any personal experience where your own father was absent during your when you're young?
Yeah, well, not to make too much of it, but my parents got divorced when I was 6. My younger brother was 5,
Okay.
and my mom raised me as a Chicago public school teacher, which is another way of saying there was not a lot of resources. So I'm very grateful that my maternal grandfather, Sam Solomon, my mom's dad, became my father figure. And then for the next 7 years, I lived with him for a while, went to different schools. It was a little bit chaotic. Um, I didn't see my dad but a handful of times a year. He had gotten remarried, moved not too far away, but maybe an hour away. And, you know, it was a little bit rough. I wouldn't say it was horrible, but, my parents just weren't meant to be married to one another. So, ironically enough, though, when I was in high school, I ended up living with my dad for part of my high school experience. And my stepmom had not signed up for that, me and my brother going to live with them. And, it's just like a lot of things in life. You just roll with the punches. So we sort of reconciled when I was a younger adult, as far as some of the differences. Sadly, we were not very close. Father and son, my dad and I were not very close. I'm not proud of that. I made a special effort to make sure that we got together for birthdays and holidays and inviting them over. Just more for the benefit of my kids getting to know their grandfather, right? Just because I didn't get along with them or see eye to eye didn't mean that they couldn't have a relationship and know who he was. And he passed away about 5 years ago now. And, it looks different, right, at different levels. When I was a young guy growing up, there was a lot of confusion. As a teenager, I saw the world a little bit, more objectively. You understand, people make decisions, right? And there's consequences, the intended or maybe unintended consequences of getting divorced. And as a married person myself, and then as a father, I looked at my relationship with my dad. And one of the things I did not mention earlier, but it led up to looking for fatherhood resources, right? I told you I was motivated to find fatherhood resources when I became a father for the fifth time. And really what motivated me was fear. Fear that I might not have a close relationship with my kids, fear that I might fall into the same trap that my father and I fell into.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to do something about that, right?
Yeah.
Being a dad, right, is one of the most important values in my life. And I've probably made some sacrifices in other aspects of my life, overcompensating for the fact that I'm not going to let that happen to me, right? I'll do whatever I can, right,
Yeah.
to be there and to be present. And one of those things is just being honest, right? First of all, with yourself, and then with those that you deal with, right? And we take that for granted that everybody is honest, but that's not always the case. And that's something that I put a lot of value on. So if you say you're going to do something, you don't need my signature, you don't need a piece of paper that says we have a contract. If I say I'm going to do something, you can count on it happening. And again, some of those lessons you learn from good role models. You want to emulate the people that you want to be more like. And then I think we also learn from other role models where maybe you can learn vicariously through the mistakes of others,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense to you.
Yes, yes. It's actually a perfect transition to a product that 21st century dads have. And this is also what we'll be talking a little bit on today. And it's called the Great Dad's Coin. And I think you put a lot of thought behind the design of this particular very meaningful product. So if you want to talk about like what even make you come up with this particular design.
Yeah, well, the backstory. The Great Dad coin is referred to generically as a challenge coin, and it was an idea that came to me because about 5 or not going on 10 years ago, a number of my friends, people that were the same age, had been career military. And after 20 years in the military, a lot of individuals decide to retire and then start a second career. They put in their 20 years, they'll get the full benefits. And if they were an officer in the military, and some of them were pretty high ranking officers for that matter, most of them had their own coin, right? Their own challenge coin. And for those that are interested, they could Google challenge coins and learn a lot about that. So mostly men, but now women as well. But mostly men in the military have been exchanging challenge coins. They give them out at like retirement ceremonies. And then I witnessed that some not-for-profits were making use of these coins. And I thought, there must be a coin out there to honor dads. And we scoured the internet. We couldn't find any that were suitable for the purpose or the intent that we had, so that we decided to just create our own. We call it the Great Dad's Coin. And like you said, Jason, there's been a lot of time and energy that went into developing the various components of the coin. And on the face of the coin, there are 4 words: the word commitment, love, honesty, and patience. And we think those are the 4 universal values that every great dad possesses. And again, we could talk about each one of those. There is a number on each of the coins, and the number 247365. And for some people, they're like, oh, I get it. I know exactly what that means. But I'll just say it again, 247365. And I've heard people chant that number, 247365, 247365. And really what it stands for is that I'm going to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So for those people that still like to drive around play about with really all we're doing with previous we will be the great outcome of the as a punishment part of our ongoing collaboration. So for those of you that's watching us live or watching the replays, please go check out the link I just posted in the live stream, and you can go check out the coin yourself. And like I say, once we get David back on the on the live stream, we can kind of continue talking about the creation and the story behind the coins, and why David even created that many years ago, as a way to honor that present. And let me change my screen here. That's one thing I really like about the coin. Hopefully we can get David back in the live stream here. Is the back. In the back of the coin, it say, I actually have a coin with me right now as well. This is how big the coin look like, as you can see. And in the back of the coin, it say, in the back, it say, great dads are present physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I find it really hard. Let's see. Is David say he's still here and can hear me? Oh, where did David go? Let's see. Let's see. David, if you can hear me, can you try to click on the link I sent you in the email again and try to get back to the live stream room? I just couldn't see you anymore for some reason. Let's see. Okay, we got David back. Sorry for the technical difficulty here.
I don't know what happened. I never lost you. I know that you lost me. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know why, but oh well, it's just part of doing live stream. It's technical issue happened, but we got it back. So I think while we were having you offline, I was just talking about the ongoing partnership that we decided to do with your nonprofit organization, because I really believe and love the cause and the mission that you stand for, and that's something that is truly needed in today's environment. And sorry, I kind of caught you off. I think you were talking about 247365 earlier.
Right. So there's a lot of design elements to the coin, and we looked at manufacturing these coins, and there's a really inexpensive way to do this. Right. You could just get a metal coin with no color, and that's the least expensive way to do it. So if you want to say, oh, I have a coin, you can go low budget. And then we started thinking, well, we want this to be a keepsake. We want this to be something that somebody's going to cherish, they're going to hold on to, and whether they carry it with them, on an ongoing basis, like I do. I carry mine literally 24/7. I challenge you, Jason, if you ever see me, whether it's online or in person, you can say, hey, do you have your coin with you? And if I can't do this, right, if I can't say, oh, I've got it with me, I'll buy you a drink. So
one of my people actually suggests, can you turn this into a necklace?
Yeah, well, it could be a money clip. It could be a divot, tool, right, for those that play golf. I mean, we've had a lot of different suggestions as far as, what the coin could be used for or turned into. Anyway, the point is that we wanted it to be something that people associated with value, right? So instead of doing something cheaply or inexpensively, which is just to crank out a metal coin with some design elements, we decided to add not one color, not two colors, but like 8 different colors to the coin. So every color is a different layer. Every color is a different step in the production process. And then we educated ourselves a little bit, and people that had been doing this not just for months or years, but decades, said, if you really want to add some extra value, you would put an epoxy finish on the coin so that you would seal the colors in so that they won't rub off as time goes by. So most of the coins, the ones that do have color, do not have an epoxy finish. And I've got some of these, I've carried them with me, and sure enough, if you have something and it's just sort of like moving around, just a little bit, rubbing against, the inside of your pocket, the color is going to come off, just like your jeans will fade. So we decided to put an epoxy finish on the coins. And then somebody said, well, if you were really smart, you would put a domed epoxy finish on the coin so that, it has that smooth feeling, right? There's not a sharp edge to it. And you're like, well, geez, every time you add a different design element, you're adding an extra layer to the process and an extra cost. So, and I'm not trying to make too much of it, but I know that the coin that we've created is in the upper echelon of all the challenge coins that are out there. And again, we decided that it's going to be a keepsake. And I would say one of the most important aspects to the coin and the way it's being presented or used as a gift, it could be used for Father's Day, it could be used for a birthday, it could be used for the holiday, or just no reason at all to be presented to a dad. And the original idea was that it would be given from a child of any age to their father or their stepfather or their grandfather or a father figure. We decided that most civilians aren't familiar with challenge coins. So instead of just having the coin in a little package, like a plastic package or a little lucite box, which is how many coins are manufactured, we would put ours in the form of a card, like a Hallmark style greeting card. And we think we've created a very attractive card, which has a message on the inside with the design elements, some of which I made reference to. And there's a space on the inside of the card where you can write a little handwritten inscription, right?
Actually,
when you're giving it as a gift.
This for the past Christmas, when I send out greeting card to all my entrepreneur friends, and everyone that received the coin really love it. So
yeah, well, thank you. That's good to know. And what I found is that was the original design, right? It's going to be given as a gift. It should be in the form of a card. We give them a mailing envelope, so it's ready to go, right? All you need to do is put your inscription in, put it in the envelope, send it to or hand it to whoever you're giving it to. And then I remember early on, like within a month or a couple of months after we had created the coins, I was having lunch with a longtime friend, and we were sitting at like a corner table in Greektown in Chicago. Outside, these two, let's just say middle-aged white guys, having lunch together. And I'm presenting one of these coins to my friend Gary Wood. Gary, if you ever happen to listen to this episode, that would be amazing. And he pushes it back to me. I said, "No, Gary, I'm giving you this as a gift from me to you." He goes, "No, I want you to present it to me." I said, "I just presented it to you. Why do you keep pushing it back?" And he said, "No, I want you to present this to me in the form of a handshake." So I'm like, "What?" Okay. So I put it in my palm and we shook hands, and then he puts his hand over my hand as I'm saying, "Gary, thanks for being a great friend. Thanks for being a great dad. Thanks for being the role model that you are to so many other people, blah, 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 blah." What I was, giving him attribution for, being a mentor of mine. And, I can see that people were walking by on the street looking at us thinking, "Oh, there's these two middle-aged gay guys holding hands in public." And I don't mean anything by that, but I'm just saying that it was, I was very self-aware, very conscious about holding hands with another man in public, right? And I could feel my body temperature going up. I was feeling flush. I was starting to sweat. I mean, it was like this visceral reaction to the shaking hand. And he said, "That's what I wanted, right? I wanted you to present this to me." And then from that point forward, Jason, what I learned from that experience was these coins, if at all possible, were meant to be presented in the form of a handshake, right? Because that is like a coveted bond, right? When you shake somebody's hand, like let's shake on it, like we're doing a deal, right? We're in agreement to doing something. And I've gone out of my way to present thousands and thousands of these coins over the years to men in a handshake, looking eyeball to eyeball. And at the risk of name dropping, I've had a chance to present these coins to Usher, the entertainer,
Whoa.
Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States,
Whoa.
actors, including Joe Mantegna. There's a fellow by the name of General Ray Odierno, who was a 4-star Army general and a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff a number of years ago, basketball star Dwayne Wade. I mean, I could go on and on and on with the number of people that I've been introduced to. All of these individuals have one of these Great Dad coins. I don't know that they cherish it or think about it the way that you and I are talking about it, but I know that many men who have been honored, right, with the Great Dad Coin or some of the dad's events that we've done, would say that that means more to them than what they're recognized for professionally, right? Because at the end of the day, what are we most proud of? We're most proud of our children, or if you have the opportunity to be a grandfather, our grandchildren. So I'll zip it up. I hope that's not too much detail.
No, thank you for sharing that story. That was a very interesting story. Thank you for sharing that. And for me, what really means the most for the coin that you designed is the message in the back, where you say great dads are present physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because based on my own personal experience with my own dad, which I will be interviewing him on the live stream soon and talking to him, try to figure out his schedule. Because my dad is also a serial entrepreneur. He started a business out of his apartment in Taiwan because the house in Taiwan is so small, there's no garage. When the very same year when I was born, that's when he started a business alongside with my mom, my uncle, and my aunt. Four of them started this business from their apartment. And they were able to grow this business into an international corporation with a factory in China, headquarter office that employ over 100 people in Taiwan, then overseas offices in all the major countries. However, growing up, even so my dad is physically there with me and my sister, but I always feel like he's not emotionally and spiritually with us, because every time when he get home, he was still working. When we talk about the boundary earlier, he doesn't really have a boundary between the family and the business, because he's always working. We'll be on the vacation and he'll pull out his laptop and just working on the business during the whole time in the vacation a lot of the time. So that's something that I feel like, for me, part of me, I associate success with this connection because of that childhood experience I had with my own very own dad. So
Mm-hmm.
I like when you share, like, I have a similar experience. Like, I want to make sure it doesn't happen to my kid, even so sometimes I feel guilty and doing exactly what my dad was doing. So is
Yeah.
but at least I'm aware of that, and right now I'm really trying to change that. So when I get home from my co-working space, I try not to bring my laptop. I will shut my phone down so I don't check any messages on my phone as much as I can, so I can really try to be present physically and emotionally with my kid. And I find that to be very, very important as a dad, as a father. And unfortunately, not a lot of father is doing that enough. So for those of you, I know there's still a few viewers that's watching us live. Please comment below or just share your experience with your dad, or even with your husband if you are married. And we'll love to see or hear more story from the viewers as well on your experience with your dad. Is your dad present physically, emotionally, and spiritually? Because the society that puts so much stress on the dad need to be supporting their children financially, but the society as a whole doesn't really talk about the emotional and the spiritual aspect of fatherhood. So maybe David, you can also touch on that a little bit as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I think to your point, society does expect men to be providers. And I think we bought into that. And I don't think it's a lie, but I think that it's sort of like a quarter truth. Um, and, if you pay your child support and make your alimony payments, your wages won't be garnished. You'll be able to renew your driver's license. But in reality, what kids need is not the money, right? I mean, it's important to be a financial provider, and let's not discount that. But there's these other three things we've been talking about, which is to be present physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So when I think about what are a dad's responsibilities, let's acknowledge that there is a financial responsibility that we have as parents or as fathers. But I think the standard has changed. A generation or generations ago, that was really all society expected of dads, was to be a provider, put a roof over your kids' heads, provide meals, provide clothing, provide education. And if you met that standard, you were good, right? You met your society's expectations. But the world has evolved. We expect more from people today, including fathers. And I think that when I think about what's expected of fathers, I think about it in a quadrant. So being financially present is one of the quadrants, but the other three quadrants, like you made reference to, are being present physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So what does it mean to be present physically? It means actually being with your kids, right? Which is easier if you're married, right? To the mother of your children. But if you're not, you might be a non-custodial dad. So now you have to bridge that gap, right? You have to be more intentional. You have to spend more time getting in front of being with your kids. That's okay, right? What does it mean to be emotionally present with your kids? Well, I am the wrong person to be asking that question. But and the reason being is I've never thought of myself as being an overly emotional person, right? That's just not a strength of mine, right? And I've sort of rationalized over the years, over the decades, that, you know, one of the reasons I'm a successful financial advisor is that I don't get emotional about things, right? I don't get distracted by what's going on, like right in front of me, right? People have jokingly said, "Oh, you should have been an air traffic controller, right? You've got nerves of steel," right? So, you know, it's certainly good not to be emotional, right, from a business standpoint or in certain aspects of your life. But if you understand the importance of being emotionally present, right, understanding other people's emotions, being able to process your own, right? There's good emotions and there's bad emotions, right? You just need to be more in touch. And we can all, most men can be more in
I
touch
actually have
with.
a follow-up question to that. What would you say to a father that is having a hard time being physically present with their family because they are always working, or unfortunately they are divorced? It's just really hard for them to to be physical, even so it's easier to be physically present. But some of the family, unfortunately, it's very hard for them to be physically present.
Yeah,
What is your suggestion on that?
yeah, well, uh, there's certain circumstances that are unavoidable. Let's just say I'm not a military dad, but if you're a military dad and you're on deployment, right, for 6 months or 9 months or longer at a time, you cannot be physically present with your kids.
Yes.
So what do you do, right? Well, a decade or more ago, you could write letters, right? That's not being physically present, but that's taking the time, right, to communicate with your loved one. You would be, again, a decade or more ago, you would be on the phone, right? Maybe on Sundays when the rates were a lot lower, right, to communicate with a family member or loved one at a distance. But today, there's no excuse for not being present,
Yeah.
whether it's Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or WhatsApp, right? The technology has reduced the distance between here and there, right? So we can be physically present, visually physically present because of the technology. And then, you know, it's sort of becoming a little bit of an old way of communicating, but communicating by text, right, is another way. Most young people, I don't know at what age, 10 or 12 or whatever age that most individuals get a cell phone or a smartphone, they are in like constant contact with one another, texting back and forth, or using Instagram, or, there's 101 platforms, some of which are more popular than others, that young people use today. And that's a way to bridge the gap. It's not replacing being physically present, but it's a way to have a presence, right? Not in the literal form of being physically present, but what we all learned through COVID and the pandemic was that if you can't physically be with your family or your loved ones, the next best thing is to be Skyping or Zooming, right? So you can see one another, you can talk real time to one another. And if you're not a custodial dad, if you're a non-custodial dad, what are you doing, right, to help bridge that gap? I don't have a solution. There's not one right or wrong way to do that, but there are ways to use the technology today to help bridge that gap. And then the last thing that we didn't really talk about, in addition to being financially present, physically present, emotionally present, is to be spiritually present. And, for some people, that's nice, but that's not the way I was raised, right? Or I was raised in a strict religious household and I rebelled, right? I don't want that, right? I don't want religion shoved down my throat. I'm not going to shove it down somebody else's throat. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. And I've heard 101 ways that people talk about their spirituality. But what I found is that while I wasn't raised in a religious home when I was growing up, my mom made an effort, but she just said, hey, got to pick my battles. I'm a single mom. And she gave up on raising me and my brother in a spiritual household. We were not bar mitzvahed. My brother and I were not bar mitzvahed like all of our prior generations of family members were. And so I didn't really know what I was missing out on, but when I got married, I had to agree if we had any children to raise our kids as Catholics. And I thought, well, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? And when we became pregnant for the first time, we have to get your child baptized. Okay. And we just sort of followed suit. And I was still not practicing, right? I had not converted to Catholicism until about a decade ago. And it was because of a calling that I had that I thought, well, I think I'm missing something here. We've been raising our kids as Catholics. They went to parochial school, first through 8th grade, and then they went on to public high schools. But, what I found was that our kids were getting a good religious foundation, and I felt like I wasn't in contact with them in the way I could or should be. And it was a result of a funeral that I went to of a close friend in Kansas City. And I realized after Peter Spokes was his name, that after Peter died and two of his 6 children eulogized him, that he had a very profound impact from a spiritual standpoint in their lives. And I thought, I'm missing something here, right? And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's what prompted me to pursue a more spiritual dimension to my life. In fact, in the book that I wrote that you made reference to, A Father's Journey to Break the Cycle of Father Absence, there's a chapter that I refer to, and it's the importance of spokes. Now, there's a play on words there because his last name was Spokes, Spokes. And the book is about this bicycle ride that I did from Santa Monica to Chicago, a 21-day ride where I rode 2,325 miles, or averaging 112 miles a day for 21 days in a row. And people were like, well, no, there's no way you did that. I said, I can document that I did that. I was 54 years old. I had no right or reason to think that I could do that. But, God willing, I bought a bike, started training, put a crew together, put a plan together, flew out to LA, started pedaling back to Chicago. And it took everything I had to do that. But the reason I wrote the book, and there's 21 chapters in the book, so about like 1 chapter a day. It's not a travelogue, but it's more talking about the importance of what we're talking about here, Jason, which is dads being present in their children's lives. Yeah. And then it talks about the advocacy, right, that we're talking about, advocating for father involvement. It's a little bit about the bicycle ride, right, because people are curious to know, well, how does somebody ride 100 plus miles a day, 21 days?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
And then it was a little bit, this was 6 years ago now. I started feeling more comfortable after that bicycle ride talking about my own personal experience. Up until then, people who were close to me knew that I did not have a close relationship with my dad, but I never really spoke about it, right? I didn't think that was important. When anybody had asked me, like you would be asking me about, fatherhood, I would just talk about my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and how important a role model he was to me. Looking at the glass being half full, right? I'm just focusing on the positive things that are going on in my life. And it's not like I had these unresolved issues, but I wasn't proud of the fact that I wasn't close to my dad. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to wear that on my sleeve. But what I found when I was doing all these interviews, TV, radio, print interviews from from the West Coast to the Midwest on this bicycle ride, people were asking me these questions. And what I realized is they appreciated my authenticity, right? When you can talk about things that you're not proud of, that you're talking about your fears, you're talking about the things that are concerning to you, and people appreciated that. So I wasn't thinking I was going to write a book, but met the right person. He inspired me to put pen to paper, and I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish. And I think that the message stands. And it's more than just, like I said, one purpose. It was
Yeah.
trying to address a number of different issues. And I hope that you might find that of interest.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll definitely also put a link to the book in the emails when we send out the replay as well. And while we are approaching the top of the hour here, I'm just going to wrap up the today's interview to say thank you so much again for being part of our live stream today. And I just want to stress, we really want to give back to the communities. So for every single Great Dad coin that we sell on behalf of 21st Century Dad on our website or even on our Amazon store, we will be donating $5 back to the 21st Century Dad Foundation. And for every Dad coin that we sell, it also help further the mission to raise awareness for the importance of responsible fathering, which is the core mission of 21st Century Dad. And I think there's so much work we still need to do, and I really want to get your organization into Asia, and that's kind of my passion, is how can we help those family back in Asia, because we have all these resources, all this nonprofit, all this foundation here in US, but how about all the family back in Asia where I'm from? It doesn't exist. So I really want to talk a little bit more about that, on how do we bring this kind of awareness, this kind of conversation, even because the mindset in a lot of Asian countries is people just refuse to talk about it, and they just pretend there's nothing wrong. I mean, father is always not physically present because that's just the way that society is, and that's kind of like the norm. But I feel like that's just not right. That's just not the way we should raise our child. So thank you so much again for being on the live stream. It's really my honor to have you and have you as a guest. And one last thing I want to say is, for those of you that have a spouse or have a father, or of course your kids' dad, David and I is also part of a very wonderful special fathers mastermind, which we meet once a week, where we share experiences with other, like I think right now we have 10, 8, sometimes 8 to 9, up to 10 people right now, that we just share a life experience, share a story, and we read a book together. And so far, I really enjoy the mastermind experience, where I actually get to share some of the things I don't get to share with any of my other friends, because people couldn't relate to that. When you don't have a kids with special needs, you just couldn't share that with your typical friends and family. So I'm really appreciate and really grateful for you running the mastermind as well as part of your organization. Thank you very much.
Well, Jason, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about the 21st Century Dads Foundation. There is a website with additional resources. If you're okay with me leaving the website.
Yes, please. Let me
so it's 21stcenturydads.org, 21stcenturydads.org, and you'll find information about the mastermind group, about the dad meetup groups, about the Special Fathers Network, and a lot of other resources. The annual conference that we put on, the YouTube videos that we've created with important messages, and then, like you'd said earlier, the podcast. And Jason, you're very modest. You did not mention that you were one of the podcast guests.
Yes, I was too. Yes, out of 160 episodes. Yes. Yeah.
So you'll have to make sure that the link to your podcast interview, so that if you can't get enough of Jason on these live events, you can listen to the interview that I did with Jason and learn a lot more about his personal background, about his family, and about what makes him tick.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yes, and I also put a link to 21st Century Dads Foundations and the website, where you can find all the wonderful programs that we run. And thank you so much for everyone that's watching the live stream, and for those of you watching the replay. We will have more interview and more other educational and very informative interview coming up soon. So thank you so much.